From the University of Toronto, and he is an associate member from the Law Society of England and Wales. He has published over 65 titles. He has also co-authored and edited several books through the Agora Cosmopolitan Publishing House based in Ottawa. So he's going to walk us through the tools you need to self-publish, and thank you very much for coming. If you have any comments or feedback, please take your feedback form in the back and fill it out. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
So thank you very much, Susie, for that introduction. So yes, I just want to again, as I did before, thank everybody for coming to our presentation and seminar workshop on book self-publishing. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come down here. Basically, the idea I have for tonight is for everybody to be empowered as writers, because sometimes when you're writing a book, it can be a daunting task to publish, and especially when you're getting into self-publishing. So the idea of this presentation tonight is for people to have a good, strong sense of empowerment and roadmap in terms of where they need to go if they choose to go the self-publishing route, or if they alternatively choose to use the traditional corporate trade publisher route. So just to give you supplement some of the background that Susie was talking about, my first title that I published was back in the late 90s. It was called National Identity and Cosmopolitan Community. I self-published it because in the process of trying to get a book published, as it was a bit of at that time particularly, a bit of a controversial content in terms of delving into certain critical areas of Canadian history. And so that was sort of my first exposure in terms of contemplating whether I should be going into the book publishing versus the self-publishing route. I've also, before that was involved in university newspapers, student newspapers, and so forth. So from that time, I decided back in the late 1990s that, why not set up a not-for-profit organization that would also assist other writers in trying to get their book published. So that's how the Agora Publishing Consortium came into being, as an idea of trying to empower writers and trying to offer services on an a la carte basis to writers who are seeking to explore the route of book self-publishing. So the website just for your own reference, is agorapublishing.com. Before I start tonight, I thought it's useful because I want to make sure that this presentation tonight is tailor-made to the type of diversity of audience, the type of concerns, the type of interest they have in coming to this type of presentation. So what I would like to do is start with, if everybody could just simply briefly introduce themselves and what the sort of interest is coming in tonight, whether they're working on a novel which is about whether to get published, or they're just abstractly interested in publishing and wanted to get some more questions. So if you could just, everybody could just at least introduce their first name and what their interest tonight is, then that would give everybody an idea of the diversity of people that came here to learn about self-publishing. People can have an idea of have a sense of community during the discussion tonight in terms of each other as writers, and would assist me in making sure that you get the most out of the presentation tonight. So if we could perhaps, we start with this gentleman over here, just say who you are and what your sort of interest is coming in tonight, and thank you very much for taking the time tonight.
Sure, my name is Jay, and I'm here just to learn more about the self-publishing side of publishing. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, this gentleman over here.
And John, I'm in the middle of writing a novel. I'm looking at possibly self-publishing.
Perfect, awesome.
I'm working this, and I want to write my books on my own life stories someday, because I'm a survivor review, so I think it would be interesting to know what my options would be.
Oh, fabulous, like a memoir or something like that? Personal memoir?
Yeah.
That's awesome, perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I interrupt? Oh, awesome. Okay.
Memoirs mainly. I got interested through a course at Carleton.
Okay.
And have been writing since.
Okay, fabulous, fabulous. I'm going to go to this lady over here.
Hi, I'm Suzanne, and I have whole series of things, writings, some poetry, some short stories, some novels, and essays. So I'm interested in the whole gambit.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you.
My name is Yash, and I just accompanying my friend. I had nothing better to do, so I'm.
Okay, awesome. Good you could join us tonight. That's fabulous.
My name is Victor Rasha.
Yes.
I'm author of one or two books. I just want to get additional information.
Awesome. Okay, fabulous. Good you could join us. This lady over here.
Oh,
Okay, fabulous. Okay.
My name is Lise, and I write family history genealogy books, and I'm interested in self-publishing.
Okay, awesome, fabulous.
John Osmond, I also do genealogy, and I've written a historical novel in paperback form, self-published.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations. Fabulous. We'll go to that gentleman over there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm just looking to expand my knowledge in this publishing area.
Okay, fabulous. This lady over here. Yeah.
My name is Heather Thompson. I work at a very small publishing house in Ottawa, and I'm also writing a literary nonfiction about family history.
Oh, fabulous. That's found a great project. Awesome. That lady over here. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Catherine, and right now I'm trying to publish either through an ebook or selling print on demand online of my novel.
Okay, awesome. Fabulous.
My name's also Catherine, and I write women's literature, and I do a lot of blogging, particularly curious about ebooks.
Fabulous. Awesome. Okay, the lady there.
My name is Lisa Meback. I'm actually an editor rather than a writer, but some of my clients want to know more about self-publishing, and I thought this would be a good way to help them.
Awesome. Fabulous. Hopefully you get some good knowledge for them tonight. Fabulous. Okay.
We're together, Steve and Wendy Robbins, and we've been chronicling our travels around the world for the last 4 years almost, and people keep pressuring us that you must turn it into a book, so we don't know where to start. So
well, that's right. We all want to hear about what your great travel. Yeah, you got to share that great information. So glad that you could join us tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, yes. I'm Deborah, and I'm a newly published author. The book's The Naked Shopper, for this region. And I'm here tonight because I want to learn more about the self-publishing again for like the next book, but also I really want to hear a lot about your marketing, distribution, and sales.
Okay, awesome. Well, hopefully we'll get some good information for you tonight. Fabulous. And over there, yes?
I'm Shelley. I have I'm a non-fiction writer, and I have a book published by University of Toronto Press.
Okay.
But I'm not that thrilled with them, so I've also self-published a book.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Get the balance there. So some people might have some questions for you too about UFD Press. Also, yeah. So just the lady over there. Yeah, we're just introducing ourselves briefly, see who we are and what we're trying to get out of the self-publishing seminar tonight. Don't mean to put you on the spot there. So yeah. So what was yes.
Wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Written a couple novels yet to be published, and one is a children's novel, and still considering the publishing market, but I wanted to learn about self-publishing.
Oh, awesome. Fabulous. Awesome. And this row, that lady over there? Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
I'm interested in self-publishing children's books.
Okay, what's your first name?
Chang.
Chang, pleased to meet you. Awesome. That lady and gentleman, yeah.
My name is Fred. I'm doing freelance editing, mostly on the academic side, presentations, theses, that sort of thing.
Okay.
I want to learn a bit more about the publishing industry this end.
Fabulous. And your friend beside you there?
I'm Solette, I'm a lawyer, and I'm interested in writing legal books.
Okay.
I'm here to get more information on publishing.
Awesome. Fabulous. And we'll go to that lady over there. Okay, perfect, perfect. And that lady over there?
My name is Yadli, and I want to have more details and information about publishing.
Awesome. Yeah, you can come down. You know, yeah, it's more the merrier. Welcome, welcome. You can, while you're out there and stuff, you can introduce yourself. What's your interest in tonight's presentation?
My name is Sierra Macure, and I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about book self-publishing.
Okay, awesome, fabulous. Awesome, fabulous. Good to join us. Then we'll go to, I'm losing track. right over there, like in the back, sort of backish row there. The lady, yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Susan.
Uh-huh.
About 100 years ago I was working in publishing. Now I have an abstract interest in what you have to say.
Awesome, fabulous. Good you could join us and yourself as well. And the white, yeah, yeah, yeah. I spoke to you. Oh, I'm losing track here. Oh my God. Okay, okay. So that lady over there.
Hello, I'm Donna. I attended a talk on online publishing, so I wanted to build on that.
Okay, fabulous, Donna. Good you could join us. That gentleman over there.
Yeah, my name is Jeffrey. I'm in the business.
Business of publishing. Awesome. Okay, perfect. And we'll go to way in the back row there. That lady over there.
My name is Julie. I'm just research information on nonfiction.
Okay, perfect. And we'll go to that lady over there in the white in the back.
My name is Juan.
Okay, perfect. Good. Glad. Welcome, welcome tonight. And that gentleman over there in the back.
My name's Michael. I mostly just write for my own amusement, but I figure find out the publishing's easy, I might try it out.
Well, that's good. Well, I hope we get some good information tonight. That lady over there.
My name is Lily. I just walked past the sign and I'm really curious. And I'm interested in self-publishing online. Like I've heard people talk, but I don't know much about that.
Okay.
And since you have a community where you can get some resource like editing and all these things.
Yeah.
So I'd like to join that crowd.
Okay, fabulous. That'd be great. Awesome. Welcome tonight. And that gentleman over there.
My name is Marcel. I do mostly social science research, but also blog and some fiction. I'm interested in hearing the experiences and insights on self-publishing, maybe the benefits and costs of self-publishing.
Okay, fabulous. Okay then, so good. Yes, thank you very much for everybody introducing themselves. So the, oh, you had a question?
Yeah, at the very start you were mentioning your website. Could you spell that for me?
Yes, so the website is Agora, A-G-O-R-A, like Agora, like the Greek square, civic square, Agora, and then publishing.com. That's agorapublishing.com. I also have business cards which has the website information. I could, anybody who wants any, I can pass that on to you at the end of the presentation. We also have a community of writers that I've been trying to foster to sort of like get-togethers through the meetup system that, you know, trying to, for writers who want to talk to each other and exchange information. In order to get to that, you know, sign up for that, you would go to a link called ottawapublishing.com, and that link would forward you to our meetup group, which currently has about close to 70 writers in Ottawa. So ottawapublishing.com is the link that you would go to for that. At the end of our presentation, we have a couple more website URLs which I can sort of give you, but ottawapublishing.com is just forward you to our meetup group so that writers can kind of talk to each other as well and engage and learn from each other's experiences. So the format tonight is that if I'm saying something that you're not sure of or it doesn't make any sense, you want some clarification on, you just raise your hand and jump right in, and I'll try to answer that question to the best of my ability. As well, if somebody in the audience says something that you have a particular experience or interest in, and they have the question, and you know, just raise your hand and I'll redirect if you want to sort of supplement whatever question they had. So we, you know, try to get a small bit of exchange tonight in terms of information as well. So right now I'm just going to start a bit. So this is again my first book I published. I basically published in non-fiction books. I also published, well, this book that first one I published got featured in the Voice of America and a number of other media. Voice of America is kind of like the equivalent to Radio Canada International. It was a topic on national identity, sort of the enigma, and it was quite, during the time there was a lot of controversy about Meech Lake, who are we as Canadians, so it stirred up a lot of, a bit of a controversy, so it got a lot of good publicity at the time. I also published a book, for example, I brought tonight, Canadian Constitutional Development since 1535 is being used by various law faculty, law libraries, for their students. Basically, it's a compilation of Canadian constitutional documents since the New France. The idea is to annotate them and make sense out of the Canadian Constitution and the constitutional development process, so it's not so dry and stuff. So I've definitely pretty much published just in the sort of the nonfiction realm. So okay then, so tonight we'll talk about the theme tonight, which is manuscript to prospective bestseller.
I can see his face.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
I can't see, he's blocking.
Oh, okay, okay. So Santa, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I apologize. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Anybody else which has any questions or any
Mike, please.
Mike, okay, sorry. Let me get the mic there. Okay, sounds better. Good, good. Okay.
Slightly better.
Slightly better. Okay, let me see if I can. Yeah, it's a little bit too tall for it or something. Okay. Sounds better? It's a good foot. A little bit too tall for the mic. Okay, can you hear me a little better now? Okay, okay, awesome. Okay, then, so anybody who has any questions, I just want to make sure this is the optimized for everybody, so just jump right in because we might want to make sure everybody can hear and they get value. There's no point coming on and says, oh, I couldn't hear 95% of what he was saying, but it must have been good. So, okay, awesome. Okay then, so again, anybody who has any questions, just jump right in. So tonight we're talking about the theme is manuscript to prospective bestseller. Now, the two things that, in terms of trying to decide as a writer, when you're trying to decide between self-publishing and going the corporate trade route is that, both of them have their sort of advantages and disadvantages. The reason which I like the self-publishing route is that it basically you have full artistic control as a writer in terms of the publishing process, because a lot of times when you go through the corporate trade route, they want, particularly if it's a very politically charged topic or whatever it is, you have to suit a particular type of corporate audience, which does not necessarily reflect, the type of interest you have as an artist, so to speak, as a writer in terms of trying to get your message across. The disadvantage to some writers in terms of the self-publishing route is that the self-publishing route is a self-funded process. So as a writer, you basically, it's like you're starting a business. You have to basically fund your own writing. When you go through the corporate trade route, you're basically giving them your manuscript, and then they're basically speculating on whether it's going to be successful, and you get a percentage of royalties. So you don't have to fund it, but these days more and more writers are having to spend money on marketing the book, even though it goes to the corporate trade route. The disadvantage of the trade publishing route is that a lot of times, this is getting to be a very tight market, and a lot of publishers these days are not taking unsolicited manuscript. If you're not a famous author, you might have a hard time, or they have to then apply for money from the government through the Canada Council or whatever fund they're applying for, and then you have to wait months and months and months, and for a potential rejection letter. So there's a lot of so people who are trying to look for self-publishing as a way to skip that bureaucracy of waiting months and months and not potentially getting a whole lot of rejection letters. The other disadvantage and with the trade route, which I've received complaints by this from writers, is that sometimes if you have a very good idea as a writer and you give it to a publishing house, there's a chance, or small chance at least, that they may steal your idea and then give it to somebody else more famous that they can promote. This has been a problem. I know, for example, there was a writer who was a lawyer from New Hampshire. She complained to me that she had these great ideas for some sort of a thriller, suspense thriller, and it was stolen. And then they were so bold as to make her aware that they stole it, and there's nothing she could do about it, even though she was a lawyer. And the reason why that is that it takes, when you're facing a publishing house, even though you're a lawyer and you know the law, it can take hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars, trying to battle them in court, and it's very hard to also copyright an idea. So anytime you're giving your manuscript out for corporate, or somebody to review, you always keep in mind to protect you, that there's always a chance that they may steal it. Same thing for the editing process. So basically, self-publishing versus publishing. So the other thing to consider as well is the type of book you're doing, nonfiction versus fiction. Now, in terms of the self-publishing route, the self-publishing route is a little bit better for a nonfiction title, and the reason which I surmise that is that if you're doing like a nonfiction title, let's say you're doing something in an expose on the Alberta tar sands, there's people already know what that is, and it's a lot easier to potentially sell that title than if you're doing an interesting romance novel in terms of trying to get press, in terms of trying to get a certain constituency of people interested in the topic. So definitely, you can still publish as a fiction writer, but it's a different sort of marketing strategy. But it's important to bear that in mind when you're choosing self-publishing versus regular publishing. Other thing to consider as well, broadly and abstractly, is binding, soft cover versus hardcover. If you're doing a self-publishing route, as I always recommend, it's preferable to use a soft cover process, because a lot of times trade publishers, they will first release the book as a hardcover and then the soft cover, but the hardcover is a more expensive process, and there's a smaller amount of publishing firms that can publish it relative to the soft cover, which is a lot more accessible. So having sort of considered those sort of broad generalities, one important thing to consider in terms of the book is the vision for your book. Whether you envision your book to be a commercial commodity, so to speak, or whether it's sort of non-commercial. This is significant in terms of choosing the self-publishing route, because if you have the vision that, okay, I want to, for this to be a potential bestseller, I want it in chapters, I want it in Barnes & Noble, I want to make money from this title, or I just want to be socially aware and I want as many people buying it as possible, there are certain considerations that you need to bear in mind if your book is a commercial product versus a non-commercial product. If your book is a non-commercial product, let's say you just wanted to sell a limited amount of copies to a certain group, you're not really concerned about things. One comparison I have for that, just to for something in your own mind, is the difference between building a clubhouse or a clubhouse in the backyard versus a house that you're going to sell in the market. If you're going to build your own house, you don't want people coming and says, oh, why is there, this looks okay, but I noticed that your window is diagonal and the piping doesn't work and electricity, I almost got electrocuted there. So if you're creating a commercial product, a lot of people these days who are looking at the self-publishing route, there's a lot of great resources out there, namely Lulu and particularly CreateSpace. But what's happening these days is that people are sort of not envisioning that there's a certain aesthetic which is associated with a book, and if you don't have that aesthetic and you tend to be commercially successful, you're going to have a serious trouble. One article which I saw, which was quite interesting, and then you can also Google yourself on the internet. It was published by David Carnoy. His title is Self-Publishing a Book, 25 Things You Need to Know. And one of the interesting pieces of information in his particular article is that with all the accessibility that people have to the self-publishing, he said that only about 1% of self-published books these days are at the standard where they're going to be accepted by Barnes & Noble or a Chapters or these type of mainstream brick-and-mortar stores. What's happening is that when you use sort of CreateSpace and stuff like that, they have a series. It's like a tool. It's like you're building a house and you have all these tools, but if you don't know how to put it right, you don't have and the right aesthetic. When time comes for these bookstores to review your book, they're going to say, "Oh, what is this? The cover is crap, and this is obviously not published. Nobody's going to buy this next." So if you're trying to get your book in a bricks and mortar store, and your book is a commercial product versus a product that you just wanted for a limited audience, then quality is key. And tonight I'm basically going to be focusing on the sort of the qualitative areas that you need to keep in mind if you want your book to be commercially successful. Tonight I'm focusing primarily on printed books, because that's what I have the experience in. I know someone about ebooks as well. The price structure for an ebook and a printed book is pretty much completely different. If you want to sell an ebook, it's not advisable to have your ebook for more than $5.99 if you're selling it, an ebook. And the books that sell the best, statistically apparently, are the books that are for 99 cents, the ebooks. So when you're doing a printed copy, you can sell it anywhere from $4.99, $5.99 to $30 to whatever amount of money that you think it, relative to the audience is going to buy for the book. So in terms of the commercial aspect of a book, as I mentioned, quality is critical. The other thing you want to consider, which a lot of writers neglect, is that it's vital to do some sort of formal or informal business plan. You have to say that, okay, I'm a self-published writer. This is how much money this is my budget for the book. This is how much I expect to sell it for. This is how much I expect to clear it, because you don't want to start something and invest and find out you're in debt, or you're not selling what you would like to sell, or you don't really have a vision of what you want to do. So the business plan will have things like how you're going to market the book, how much sales you expect, your timelines, and traditionally, in terms of when you're starting a business, there's always a certain amount of period where there's a loss before you start making any profit. So as a self-published author, you really need to have a certain amount of budget in mind, and if you want to bear the sort of potential investment needed in marketing and all the investments you need in order to get the book off the ground. The other thing you want to consider if you're doing a commercial book is the publishing entity that you're under. Oh, sorry. You got any question?
What was the author's name for the 25 things you need to know?
Oh, okay. The author's name, sorry, is David, and then his last name is spelled Carnoy. The title of that article is Self-Publishing a Book, 25 Things You Need to Know. I found it to be the best article which I found on the internet in terms of succinctly laying out things that you as a writer, or anybody who's a writer, needs to consider when self-publishing a book. So my presentation will largely complement that, although I'll also go over some of the critical points that he raised. What he does in the article is that he wants to caution any writer who is going to be self-publishing that really, if they want to be successful, you got to think of quality. And there's a lot of writers out there who are having books which are not selling because there's not really a quality focus. In terms of, for example, I'll give you an example right here. In terms of our own sort of Agora publishing, this is an example of a writer came to me or came to us about a few months ago, and they were having problems with the book. So this is an example of a book that he presented to us, that he says, okay, you know what, this is the book I'm trying to do, what's the problem with it? So basically it's a pretty Spartan looking book, and this is the kind of book presentation which is definitely not going to fly in Chapters or a bricks-and-mortar store. It's kind of blank in the back, and it has all the the content, which is good, definitely, and has some illustration in it too, but it's definitely not in a sellable presentation. So we were able to revamp the book from this, and then we were able to get it into this presentation, which is a completely different looking book. I can have anybody who wants to see it afterwards, if they want to see the difference, they can afterwards. So basically, and basically in terms of the book itself, he wanted to get into chapters. We sent it into chapters, and there was, chapters sees self-published books all the time, and they were quite sort of skeptical. But when they said it, they says, oh, we were going to take this in consignment, but we're not going to take it in consignment. We'll get it distributed throughout our system, available on our website. So this is why it's very important to look at the quality aspect, because when it goes to a bricks-and-mortar store, they're going to be looking at every little fine detail and make sure that it looks professional. So that's definitely, as a writer, if you want to get in there, it's definitely job number one is to definitely make sure that your book is a quality product. Anybody else had any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just from something you said a couple of minutes ago, I'm wondering with manuscripts and sending them into, say, a trade publisher, I've talked to another author who said that some of the higher end or like the big name publishers require actually several $100 or $1,000 even to look at that manuscript. Do you know anything about that, or do you know the range, if that's normal, or the range of what publishing houses.
Oh, the
generally
publishing,
ask
is
for.
it a sub-publishing house or a publishing house?
No, these are trade publishers.
Trade
So-
publishers requesting money?
Yeah, to see a manuscript.
Oh, no, they're not supposed to be doing that. That's not an ethical process. I wouldn't go to them. No, that's like a little con thing, you know. Like if you go into a trade publisher, they're supposed to just look at it without any money associated with that. And how much were they asking out of curiosity?
This is an author I was speaking to who ended up self-publishing because every single kind of bigger, publishing houses in Canada and the U.S. were asking something like several hundred to over $1,000.
Yeah, well, they're not supposed to be doing that, so that's.
So this isn't something you've encountered.
No, yeah, they're not. I mean, if you're going to a self-publishing house, sometimes they may request something like under $100 or that, which is even usual, depending. I mean, if it's a situation where they have to give it out and they have to give it to somebody professional to review it, a very sort of nominal fee, but definitely if you go into a trade publisher, the whole idea of going to a trade publisher is that you don't have to put any money into the review process, and that you'll only be getting royalties. So yeah, they're not supposed to be doing that. So I wouldn't. I mean, if they're doing that, there's no advantage to going to them if they start asking for fees right there. I mean, that's a little bit of a hokey process. So I'd be very leery about that. So yeah, I would avoid any trade publisher which is asking fees because
They call Vanity Press.
Yeah.
And they're sort of more or less of a con artist. So.
Yeah, Vanity Press is like, they have the trade publishers, right? Vanity Press is what they used to refer to, particularly up to the 70s and early 80s. Vanity Press is what they used to call self-publishing houses. Vanity in the sense that, authors publishing themselves, and the idea was that, they weren't really to be considered seriously because they're just trying to get their name in print. So I guess what that was, might have been the origin of the term vanity, but Vanity Press refers to sort of these self-publishing houses that were, in the 70s when, at that time, 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, self-publishing was very stigmatized. But now with the advent of all these Create Space and Lulu, it's become so popular and trendy that it's become more accessible in terms of the public conception of publishing. And because the idea with the internet is that everything's become more level. It's just that as we become more accepting and more aware that there's a self-published authors, there's a lot of authors out there which are not making this grade in terms of quality. That's the whole problem there. So there's more accessibility, but quality is not increasing because a lot of writers are trying to rely completely on their own devices. And if you're going to self-publish and you're not really experienced in it, you really have to allocate a certain amount of resources to somebody who do have the experience to look and make sure that it's the proper aesthetics. Particularly if you're going to use something like Create Space, I would advise anybody who's using Create Space, if they want to be commercially successful, that just before they publish their book, they try to find some subcontract out their book for it to be looked at to make sure that it meets a certain amount of aesthetic and copy editing and all the other things that bricks and mortar stores might be trying to evaluate if you're trying to get into a brick and mortar store.
And if you pay a set fee, not a percentage? Because some company will charge a percentage as opposed to a set fee, so it's always just set a fix.
Yeah, you definitely, anytime for fees and stuff, the regular trade publishers shouldn't be doing that, depending on what they're. But I'd be very careful about, like self-publishing, you have to pay a fee because you're self-funding it. But I'd be very careful about dealing with actual regular publishers which are trying to do certain things. My advice is just to ask a lot of questions and make sure you have a good cover level before you actually go through a contract like that. Yeah.
Are there book agents in Canada just like there are quite a few in the US? Somebody who will evaluate your book based on their experience and provide you with some feedback?
Yeah, there are book agents, literary agents. Yeah, the literary agents basically are like, they act like as go-betweens yourself, and if you're going through trying to get your book in the regular corporate trade publishing route, they can be very expensive, just like the book publicists. Somebody in Los Angeles was quoting to me that when they were trying to use a book publicist, on the other hand, what they try to do is that they will try to get your stuff in the media and get it publicized. And somebody said in Los Angeles they they can cost around $250 an hour just to go through those services. So sometimes literary agents and those type of services can be quite expensive. So this is why I kind of helped launch Agora to kind of cut down the cost and provide an alternative to some of those very sort of profit-centered outfits, so to speak. Anybody had any more questions at this time, or? Okay then. So quality. So right now what I'm going to be providing is the roadmap of what's basically you have to keep in mind if you're trying to get published. And so some things to consider is that the first thing to consider in terms of getting a book published is you really have to be thinking about an ISBN number. Now the ISBN number is a mechanism of identifying your book. It is often, for example, if you go to the chapters, for example, you'll see the barcode on the back of the book as well. And the significance of that is that, getting a barcode is not necessary, but if you're trying to get into a store like Barnes & Noble or Chapters or whatever, that's a mechanism for inventory management. If you don't put a barcode in the back of the book, it doesn't have to be printed on the book, but if you don't print it on the book, you're going to get a sticker and put a barcode in the back as well, but it's an inventory management. If you don't want your book to be necessarily in a bookstore, then you just want to sell it to some libraries and so forth, you don't really need to be putting a barcode in the back, or you can put it back later if you decide to choose your mind, but the ISBN is critical. I know some services like CreateSpace, which is affiliated to Amazon.com, they don't require a barcode. What they do is that they have a substitute number instead of a barcode, instead of an ISBN number. But I don't advise that because those numbers that they use are sort of idiosyncratic to the company. An ISBN is like a universally accessible system for libraries, booksellers, anybody who wants to access your book. The ISBN, then once you get the ISBN, basically that's you get that through a National Library of Canada, so you have the ISBN. And the other thing you want to consider is the CIP, cataloging publication. The cataloging publication has gone through the Library and Archives as well. It's the basis of, it's a sort of a pre-marketing and publicity for the book. I should just step back and explain what the whole idea of pre-marketing is. The idea of pre-marketing is the idea that as you're, let's say you you're writing your book and you want to get it published, let's say eventually in November 2013 or March 2014. It's while you're writing the book, it's a good idea to make sure that there's an infrastructure in place so that your potential book buyers, people going to buy your book, that they can in fact order your book while you're writing it. And this is what the trade publishers do all the time. If you go to Amazon.com or all these online bookstores, you might see a book that says, oh, I couldn't order that book because it's not released, but they have all the publicity out. So as a writer, you can also emulate that process that corporate trade publishers are doing by getting your book out there while you're writing the book so that individuals can in fact order the book. Before I get into more of the detail of that, one thing I wanted to focus on, which I kind of skipped a little bit, is in terms of the publishing entity. When you're publishing a book, and this is a critical point that I wanted to make sure we focus on, you basically, I would suggest if you're going to the commercial route, avoid just using a name. It's a good idea to consider a business name. A business name could be under a sole proprietorship, which is registered through the government of Ontario, a partnership, or if you're going to go the corporate route, you can choose between a not-for-profit corporation or a for-profit corporation. A for-profit corporation is what you choose if you want to create a publishing company that's driven by shareholders which are investing in your company. The disadvantage of the for-profit route is that you definitely have to get a lawyer if you're going to create a for-profit publishing entity for your publishing house. The alternative to that is a not-for-profit route, which I would recommend. Instead, it's a lot easier to create. And the importance of this publishing entity is that it'll separate your accounting from, if you're selling a book, you don't want your personal, Revenue Canada data and you're publishing data for your book project all enmeshed, so it keeps your accounting separate. That's the first thing. The second thing in terms of the commercial route for a book is that legally, if somebody goes through your book and wants to sue you, the corporate, creating a corporation or some type of business entity as a buffer between yourself as an individual and the book helps protect yourself from personal liability claims as well. So, so definitely, publishing name. Now, in terms of Agora, what we have done for this particular author over here is that some writers say, well, I don't want to go through that process of publishing, creating my own name, whatever. We're able to, the Agora, to writers able to publish under that mantra, under that sort of a name, so that we can in turn facilitate authors who don't necessarily want to create their own name as well. So I just thought I'd mention that. Does somebody have a question in the audience? So, yeah.
What's the benefit of having a catalog and publication record?
Okay, the cataloging and publication, what basically they're going to be asking you is that when you go through the cataloging and publication, when you go through ISBN, what you're basically is going to be getting an identifying number and a title and the author name. Okay, that's all. When you go through the cataloging and publishing route, you can upload your book cover. They're going to ask you, a little bit about yourself as a writer. They're going to be asking all sorts of information about yourself as a writer and about the book. Does it have an index? Does it have a bibliography? Is it illustrated? So what you're going to be getting through the CIP route is you're going to be getting an enhanced profile. Anybody who wants to buy your book, they get an enhanced profile of what your book is and who you are. And it goes automatically through the libraries. They'll say, "Oh, that's interesting. A book by John Smith on mountains in Canada, wherever it is." So the cataloging and publication is an enhanced opportunity for yourself as a writer to make sure that you get the most out of getting your book out there while you're completing the book itself. So they're just going to ask you a whole lot of information, and it just makes it, your data more available to people who are going to be potentially going to buy your book. The other thing to consider, so you have the ISBN, the CIP. The third thing to consider in pre-marketing is the books in print. Now, books in print, there used to be a Canadian books in print, but that was disbanded. That used to be controlled by U of T Press. University of Toronto used to have that, but they basically can afford to keep it up. So now books in print is run for both basically Canada and the United States through Bowker, R.R. Bowker. So you basically, once you get the CIP, once you get the ISBN, you would get yourself or ourselves or whoever you're dealing with, we go through books in print. And the advantage of that with this CIP is that once you get registered in an enhanced listing through books in print, your data would be automatically streamed to Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, and a variety of different online bookstores with the book cover you uploaded as well. So that's the books in print. So books in print, CIP, and the ISBN. Those are the three things you definitely want to keep in mind when you're involved in the pre-marketing process. Did anybody else have a question you want to ask? Is that clear?
I was just going to ask, is there a cost to
okay, no, if you go through the process of just the CIP and the ISBN through Library and Archives Canada, there's no cost to that. Library and Archives is a free process for that. If you're going through the books in print, that's a little different system. That's controlled through the United States. And actually, the difference between the American system and the Canadian system is that the Americans down there have to all be paying for their ISBNs. Each ISBN they order, it's like $100-something a lot of times, depending on what company you go through. So when you go through our Bowker, there's going to be a potential cost to that depending on what type of listing you decide to create through R.R. Bowker. So there's a bit of a cost associated with the actual books and print registration process depending on what kind of listing you want created.
So those three things can be done even before you're finished?
Yeah,
because if you want your table of contents and all that, and if you're not finished, you don't have how can you submit to CIP, and they ask for those things. They ask for your introduction, they ask for your table of contents, and if you're not totally finished, how do you know?
Well, in terms of the CIP process, you only you don't have to fill out every field. The more you fill out, the better. But if you're an author and you're in a, I don't know, 20% or 30% stage, you'll probably have the information for the CIP for at least 80% of it. You'll have like title, you have, and this is another thing I advise too. I advise that before you complete the book, as quickly as possible, that you create a book cover. You get a book cover design for the book. That's essential. And also, as discussed by this author that I referred to as well, the writer of that article, and by CNET, when you're creating a book cover, I mean, there's an old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but unfortunately, most people, as well as particularly booksellers, are looking for the cover. And as this author points out, there's a lot of authors which are using clip art and a variety of other stuff for their cover, and it doesn't look good. So the cover is an essential process before you even finish the book. As soon as possible, I advise to get the book cover created and get it posted along with through CIP and through your author website, which is a very important thing to consider also in pre-marketing, to get an author website done. So when you're doing the CIP, basically you should have a rough idea what a table of contents is. You can always change it. It doesn't have to be iron and stone. The only thing, you might not have, you can just mention, okay, bibliography, yes, I have that. It will have an index. Basically, you submit as much information as you can to the CIP, and the more information, better. But it doesn't have to be like, you're not submitting them the whole book. You're just submitting them what you have as you edit it. And sometimes, as a writer, you'll probably have the skeleton of the book, and that's all the type of information they need. And it might take you several months in order to actually copy, edit it. Get the sentence structure all sorted out, vet it through and stuff like that. So you're basically just giving them the skeleton of what you're going to be sending to them for the CIP.
That's all they need is a skeleton.
Yeah, you're not sending them the whole book. You're just sending them certain fields that you're sending, that you're giving to them. Who you are, a little bit of bibliography about yourself. Yeah.
I seem to remember when I submitted for CIP and ISBN, though there are some things that should be definite, like the title of your book. If you change that, or if you put a subtitle in, that's not going to be listed. So there are some things that.
Yeah, I mean, as an author, you should definitely have the title. I mean, you definitely need to have the title of the book before you start the process, because that's essential for the ISBN and the CIP. I mean, if you're trying to do this, you don't even have the title of the book, then it's definitely too early for you. And the other thing for the title of the book, which is very critical in pre-marketing, you definitely want to pick an evocative title, not too generic, not something which is something which is going to be a marketable and which is going to be not serve your interest. You don't want a title which is people are going to say, what is that? So title is critical. So title, book cover design, ISBN, CIP, and data, books in print, author website, very important too. If you promote the book and say, oh, check out my website, and you go to your website and go, oh, this is kind of a crappy website. I mean, people these days, with I wouldn't want to say the superficial, but definitely they're into looks, they're into, ooh, that looks cool, ooh, that's interesting. So the better you can make your author website is, the better it is in terms of marketing the book. I would be very leery about, there's a lot of free resources you can use. You can use WordPress, you can use, certain free blog sites as well. But if you're trying to get your book marketed to CBC and so forth, you probably don't want a very hokey website and a sort of a long, like, John Smith blogspot.com /so-and-so. That's probably not a good thing to market your book. You definitely want to have your own domain name, and a domain name which is short, so that, rather than, and a short domain name is good as well because it's easier to remember. You don't want like a long thing which people are not going to be able to remember as well. Anybody else have any more questions about pre-marketing the book? Okay then, so let me just see. Yeah, so pre-marketing. So after you sort of focus on the foundation, basically pre-marketing is a parallel process. Once you're writing the book, getting it all sorted, you're just making sure that when the book's out there, people are going to be able to are in position of buying the book, ordering the book, because bookstores like Amazon.com and so forth, they can take your order and you can put status, not printed yet, and it will be available at a certain amount of time. The other question I sometimes get is, should I go ebook? Should I go printed book? I always suggest that you want to do both. Both is a good idea. You're able to corner your markets that way. The other thing which I wanted to mention as well in terms of the ISBN is that every format you do, you have to have a different ISBN. Like for example, here's a binding and here's like a soft cover. These would have to have two different ISBNs. Because if you're at a store, there's going to be different price points for each one. An ebook might be $2.99, and a certain binding might be, $10, and the hardcover might be $31.99. So there has to be an identifying number for each of the different formats of the book that you're using, so that a bookseller or book buyer can say, okay, my particular client, they're interested in your spiral-bound book, or they're interested in the hardcover, or they're interested in the soft cover. So there has to be a separate ISBN and CIP registration for each particular book. So that's something also very critical to consider. So, so the second phase after the pre-marketing is the manuscript development. Basically, that's important. Basically, most writers are pretty familiar with that. Just put the ideas for the book, getting it together. Start thinking about copy editing the book. Make sure you got good sentence structure. There's different levels of copy editing. There's a copy editing that you want for spelling mistakes and grammatical structure. There's also a more intense form of editing if you want somebody to say, well, does this make sense? If you're writing a fiction book, you definitely, or a fantasy book, it's definitely good to get people who are familiar with that genre so they can say, well, why did it end like that? Oh, that doesn't make any sense. So if you're writing a fiction book, you definitely want to get it peer-reviewed to somebody who is familiar with that genre so it makes sense, so it's more sellable. If you're writing a non-fiction book, sort of a different audience that way, definitely still want to make sure there's a good sentence structure, there's a good flow. Another thing to consider is how many illustrations you're going to have. That's going to affect your pricing as well. Other thing to consider with self-publishing a book is that the more you publish, the cheaper it becomes. The beauty about self-publishing is that you can just publish one. You can just say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to publish one book. But that's going to be a more expensive per unit cost than if you do 1,000. So, but with self-publishing, you can sort of test the market and see how it runs and, control your resources that way. But it's definitely going to be a little bit different if you publish just one book, because there's cost involved in setting up the press, the binding, and all the other things that you need to set up in terms of the infrastructure for the book. And as I mentioned before, in terms of manuscript development, when you're getting the book copy edited, try to be careful that that you're giving your book out to somebody that you have a feeling of confidence in. I would avoid. Some people recommend like CreateSpace and stuff. They have their own people you can submit your content to and stuff like that. But I'm not going to say anything against them per se. But I'm just, for my own view, I prefer to deal with somebody that face-to-face, or somebody that I have a certain amount of confidence in, because you don't want your stuff to be stolen. Because what happens is that the more sort of a prominent somebody is as a literary agent, or you might say, oh, this guy, he publishes with McGill Press or whatever. He's very strategically placed, and the people, the higher they up, the more likely and the more of incentive they have to potentially steal your content. So, something I want to caution about that. Yeah.
People can go, to the website of the Editors Association of Canada, EAC, and there are editors of all kinds listed there, and it also has enough information to help you educate yourself about how to deal with an editor.
Okay, everybody got that? Editorsassociation.com. What is it again?
No, Editors Association of Canada.
Canada, okay. Okay, just Google that and you'll get some good information there, hopefully. Okay, the third aspect is production and printing costs, as well as, anybody have a question? Oh, yes?
Some writers use non-disclosure agreements if they want to hire an
Yes, you can use a non-disclosure agreement. And just to give you a background, myself, I have a background in teaching law as well. So, the non-disclosure agreement can be useful, and as it's particularly used when if you work, let's say you're owning Kentucky Fried Chicken, you don't want your employees giving out the secret herbs and recipe and all sorts of corporate trade secrets. So those can be useful. The problem is that in terms of copywriting an idea, sometimes it can be There can be an enforceability clause, just like with that lawyer I was mentioning. You know, you create an agreement and you say, oh yeah, you definitely violated it, and then you want to go to court and you find out, well, you need like hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself. So even if you're legally right and you have all the paperwork signed, unless you have the money to enforce non-disclosure clause or any type of legal agreement, then you're going to be in potential square one basis. Somebody can say, oh, that's this person, we're McGraw Hill or we're, Penguin Books, and that's just a nuisance thing. And the judge says, oh yeah, well, you're probably a nuisance, never mind. So definitely those can be a good thing to go through, but they're not necessarily 100% clad protection. Yeah.
Sorry, we throw around the term copyright a lot.
Yeah.
But how would one obtain the copyright? Is it by virtue of publishing that it comes about, or is there a way that one can do it without it yet being copyrighted?
Yeah, in terms of the copyright, I mean, every book will have that. They'll have a copyright page. This is something you should do right at the beginning of the book, like all rights reserved, copyright by, Joan Smith, so-and-so, this is not to be used, so-and-so, and so. So anytime you issue and anytime you send your stuff out, it's an intent that you intend this content to be protected. So by putting a copyright page with an appropriate legal disclaimer, you'll definitely be protecting yourself, at least in writing, from those types of infringements. But that's a necessity for all books to have that page.
So it's just something that people add, and once it's added, it's copyrighted?
Yes, it's copyrighted by virtue of your legal affirmation to any readers that my content is therefore copyrighted. I mean, there are other sort of ways you can go through the government of Canada to, if you want to pay a fee, you can also get an enhanced copyright protection, but that's generally not necessary.
So that already gives you copyright protection by writing it?
By writing that legal disclaimer with your work. Okay. Yeah, what you were going to say?
From research that I've done, and I work in the publishing, in Canada, the current law is when you write something, it is under copyright. You don't need to even put the symbol, so you write your notes. Well, that's not great. You write a novel is copyrighted because you wrote it. But you can submit to the government, you pay about $50, and you have this little certificate that said it is copyrighted, but you don't need that for legal.
So one would just put a C if one wanted to with the year, and that's it.
Yeah, that's all I would advise. I mean, I would definitely not publish anything without doing that. Yeah, but that's the minimum I would do. Anybody had another question? Okay, so when you're so production and printing, you definitely as a self-published author, basically have to decide, okay, this is what my production cost is going to be. When you're publishing a book and it's a perfect bound book, the costs break down to the book cover design, the cost of the paper, and the cost of any subcontracted out services you want to take advantage of to make sure that your book has the proper aesthetic for a book. The more you can budget you have to do that, the more you can assure yourself that if you're trying to do a commercial product, it's going to be quality. If you're fairly confident of yourself, you can kind of keep your costs down in your experience, but the risk is that you're going to potentially be vulnerable to your book not being taken up by the bricks and mortar store. If you have everything down there, but it's like, oh, this book is a little bit strange, so definitely production and printing costs, definitely want to have in mind that what basically the structure is for ensuring that that your book has proper cost breakdown. How many copies you're going to do, what I'm going to do 5 or 10, what I'm going to do 1,000. So basically you want to price that out and put that with some sort of informal business plan, so you have in mind, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend. I'm going to spend $500 on this book. I'm going to spend $10,000 in the book. Basically you have to decide what your budget on. The other one big area that a lot of authors kind of neglect is the layout and typesetting. I mean, this is an absolute critical thing to consider. Is that has to do with the aesthetic of the book. When, for example, I'm helping an author get together a book like this book, for example, I mean, such factors which are vital is distance from your margin, the type of font you choose, what kind of genre of book it is. Is this font more appropriate for this genre or this other font? There's a lot of sort of artistic considerations when you're putting a book to make sure that it looks like stunning, almost like you're building a house, but it's a book. You want a stunning look, or a look which is, it's like, oh, that's, you're trying to impress somebody. You definitely want something to which has a certain amount of aesthetic, just like you're cooking a good meal, people kind of eat with their eyes. It's like, oh, this kind of tastes okay, but it kind of is a little bit sloppy and stuff like that. So definitely layout and typesetting is a critical thing to consider. Again, there are services like CreateSpace and stuff like that out there which provide templates, but definitely you want to put yourself in the 1% of books which get, which are as good as, the corporate books rather than the 99% which are not so great.
I'm just wondering, if I were to hire someone to do typesetting for a hard copy book, what sort of fee would that be? What's the cost?
It all depends on all sorts of different factors. I mean, I wouldn't want to put a generic pricing out there, but I know, for example, that David's article on CNET, he said that if you want to really do a quality book, once you're going to deal with the typesetting issue, the marketing costs and all that together, he said that can be up to $7,000. This is the figure he chose for a particular book. Now, in terms of that aspect over there, basically, I would try to negotiate with that. I mean, some people can say 1 cent a word, some people can say 1.9 cents, some people might charge it for the whole thing and say, oh, we'll just charge you $200, $300. I mean, it all depends on a project by project basis, but what I would do is, try to get some comparisons and see, which ones, try to look at their work and see which services look better, which you can afford, because everything goes down the bottom line. I mean, if you have only a certain amount of money, then you definitely don't want to exceed that. And so, try to keep things to your budget and try to find a service which is going to provide the quality and the cost structure to you that it's going to not waste your money, but it's going to be consistent with your budget. But it's not really it's the sky's the limit in terms of, it's a broad range in terms of what you could be spending on in terms of cost-wise. But, so it definitely varies there.
Is that usually a subset of the production and printing in terms of the skill set?
Is layout and typesetting a subset of production?
Yeah, or vice versa.
Layout and typesetting is kind of like a subset of production and printing, but it's like a big subset. But yeah, it's kind of like a subset. But I
guess what I'm asking is, if you found a production shop or a printing shop, do they offer that service?
No. Okay. No, they don't. They generally not offer. They don't offer the service. This is what that author, which I showed you, that was the problem. He basically, he was dealing strictly with a printer, and the printer just basically, he sent some Word files, and they just printed it off and put it together. So if you just go through a printer, they're not going to be focusing on that. So your book is going to be coming out in, just roughly whatever you send them. So when you're trying to get a book done with the layout and typesetting thing, is a very, you basically will, have to kind of, it's something you have to eyeball, and it's like, and you have to kind of figure out, okay, this is the appropriate size for this, beginning of chapter, this is how much space I want, this is how I want my thing to lay out. So it takes a lot of fine looking through the book, a fine eye to kind of make sure the thing comes out right. And if you just go through a printing house, they're not going to be, the printing house is just basically prints your book.
So in terms of the roadmap, we should be the other way around then. The layout and typesetting should be before production.
I mean, if you're going to do it on a chronological basis, layout you'd probably want to focus on first, then you print it there and stuff, but the printing, layout, and typesetting are all part of production process, but definitely that's a good point. Layout and typesetting want to go before, and then you get the book printed and get it priced. Once it's laid out, and then, and preferably, it could be in a PDF file, then you can go right to the printing side. Yep.
Other than CreateSpace that you've been mentioning, what can you recommend another program for layout and typesetting to do on one's own?
Yeah, well, in terms of CreateSpace, I'm not necessarily recommending them. For myself, I wouldn't use them personally, but I know that's a common service. Some people have used Lulu, but CreateSpace has become, very common because they're linked to Amazon.com, so they've become the most common. But they offer a lot of good convenience, and some people have said that they like the quality of paper that CreateSpace uses. But when I went through their services, I found it to be a little bit too much cookie cutter, and can give writers a false sense of security. But it definitely has a certain amount of convenience there. And some writers complain that they weren't getting the kind of personal attention that they thought they could get. So.
Sorry, I guess that I was clear enough, but I'm not talking so much an online process, but more, for example, one would use Word, right?
Oh, okay.
So a program that's equivalent to Word that might be more useful for actual typesetting.
Word is like we use Word for example. Word is not good for, not really good for typesetting. I mean, it's not really a program. Yeah, it's not. I mean, Quark Express used to be good back in the day, but basically you need to get like a certain. You can get packages which kind of assist you in that process, but in the final analysis, that Word will get you to the stage of just before the you go to the layer and typesetting process. But what were you going to say? You had an answer there? Or?
Yeah, we used Adobe for my last book.
Yeah.
Did it ourselves. Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you want.
The high quality Adobe,
Pro
or something, but you just buy it staple. It's maybe $250 or something.
The one that most publishing houses, magazines and books use is called InDesign. What's it called? InDesign. It is through Adobe. It's INDESIGN, and it's CS6. That's the basic layout.
Yeah, so companies like Adobe, I mean, they also can get your stuff outputted in the PDF. I mean, PDF is what you want your stuff outputted just before you get into the stage of ready for the printer and stuff. But definitely those are good recommendations there in terms of getting your stuff appropriately formatted and laid out and presented. So once you get to your book is out there, there should have been enough groundwork going for your book that what I call the other stage is the post-marketing. Is sort of getting your book announced and saying, well, it's finally out, and fulfilling those orders, getting and doing all that good stuff in order to make sure the media is aware of it, publicizing the book, getting out there. And some people for this process use publicists and stuff like that, which can be fairly expensive and stuff. What we've designed is we have designed a process for authors that they can publicize their own work freely. I can email you that information as well, but agoracosmopolitan.com is the site we have in order to for writers to basically write and highlight their book projects that they're doing or stuff like that. So yeah, so definitely anybody which wants to ask a question about it, I can get into it later.
What's it called again?
agoracosmopolitan.com, AGORA, cosmopolitan.com. I'll also give you a link to, we also have a YouTube video which sort of describes what our services are about as well. You can go to publishingtv.com, and then what that would do is that will link would forward it to the video of Agora Publishing, which is basically what it is that it is a not-for-profit organization. Anytime an author says, you know what, I've done everything, but I think my book cover sucks, or I want this done. There's a variety of services that you can take advantage of. Some are free, and some we have on a cost recovery basis, and so forth. You can take advantage of those services as well through agorapublishing.com. So marketing, so definitely there's also some options of marketing, but if you have a big budget, you can go through publicists and book agents and so forth, but if you don't want to keep your budget down, there's a lot of free resources in social marketing. Take advantage of Facebook, any sort of internet savviness that you might have access to, as well as the type of resources we are trying to provide to authors to kind of additionally get their book marketed and available. Distribution, another thing I just wanted to point out as well is that if you're going through a distributor, bookstores like, again in the States, Barnes & Noble, a lot of the bricks-and-mortar stores, they will require you to go through a distributor to handle your book. In the United States, a distributor can take up to 65% of your retail price for the book. So if your book is $19.95, they're going to be taking 65%, and that gets distributed between the the 40%, the bookstore takes, and then the balance gets taken by the actual distributor. So a lot of sub-publishers kind of complain about that. What happens with a lot of distributors you have to be careful of, particularly in the United States, is that you'll have to sign an exclusive agreement, and you as a self-published author can't even sell directly to anybody. You legally have to always go through them, and the distributor is not even in fact marketing your book. So you end up being in a legal bind. So when dealing with a commercial distributor, I'd be very careful about that. If you just wanted to sell through Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, you can distribute your books directly without having to worry about an intermediary distributor. There's also some distributors you can go to, which like we provide a service as well, that you don't have to have any exclusivity in terms of distribution agreements.
How about consignment? Is it not, if they don't want, can we just leave it as consignment?
Yes, you can go through consignment, and this is what we have. Yeah, this is what we originally were trying to do with this particular book, but Chapters decided that it was too good for consignment, they said. But if you're going to do some consignment, the process we would do is that you would approach like a bookstore like Chapters, and you would say, I'm a self-published author, can I get this book in your store? And they would, and if they accepted, they would display your book and pay you after the book is sold. The only problem with that process is that if the book is damaged, if somebody was looking at the book and they spilled coffee on it, you have to absorb the cost of the book, and you might not be able to sell it. You know, there's a small chance of that, but and it definitely should have an ISBN barcode in the back. But yeah, you could always go through a consignment, but you know, yes, it's definitely. Do you have other particular question about consignment? Or, yeah, so yeah.
Can I just add something to
Yeah,
that a
yeah,
little bit?
yeah.
That's all right. Who asked about that?
That lady over there?
Oh, okay, okay. Several of my books are being sold through consignment at a number of locations. I use a small consignment agreement. And then when it comes to like youngchapters.ca, places like that, when it comes to get into the shops, like the brick and mortar, like he's talking about, like Chapters, Indigo, places like that, they do take immediately like 45% easily off of your book. So something that I've done to try to make sure there's always something coming back to me as the writer of the book, through consignment, I have a price that I charge for that book. When it goes into Chapters, into a store on a shelf, I bump it up, this one, $2 more.
If it's
So it's registered, let's say like, what's it, the CIP, like that, at a price that is at the higher level. But then that's because of the higher percentage they take from Chapters and Indigo, places like that. But I have another level that I sell to individuals and through all consignment shops with a consignment agreement.
Oh, so $2 more you charge them.
I said their original price, the highest price. That's because places like Chapters, and that takes so much a percentage from your book. And then the rest are all by consignment agreements, which is no cost to either party. And I spend the price a little bit lower. Okay?
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much for making that point. Thank you very much. Yeah, so thank you. Definitely, yeah. So one thing I should mention in terms of marketing, there are certain resources you can take advantage of a variety if you want to market your book. One particular publication, which I think is a good publication if you want to invest in, is the New York Review of Books, which we have advertised in as well. That's a very well-established book review magazine that you can advertise in. And what a good point about that is that there are a lot of libraries and booksellers which look in the New York Review of Books and will buy your title from whatever information you can provide on there as well. Other thing I should mention in terms of the book marketing process is that you know, when you're self-publishing, it's good to have a certain amount of copies for you know, journalists who might want to review your book, and they can definitely give you some good publicity as well. I was reading an article, in that same article I mentioned to you that there were some companies which are actually charging to review your book and to publicize it as well. You know, I would definitely, you know, avoid going through that route unless you had an extra amount of money to burn in terms of that process. But you know, if you find some good services out there, you can definitely take advantage of that as well. When you're going through, along with book distribution, the other thing you want to be focused on is your sale and inventory management system. It's good to have access to some software that you're able to say that, okay, you know, Amazon.ca, Book City in Toronto, Libre Champlain, or whatever. You know, you want to be able to control this: how much books I have, and this how much is ordered, and this is how my revenue is. You definitely want to make sure that you're somewhat savvy with a computer, so that you're able to manage your inventory and make sure that you're balancing your books and things are coming in and out the way you would like it, and you don't go haywire there and stuff. So inventory management is definitely a good thing to have, and to sort out your sales there. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the roadmap is in terms of book self-publishing. And did anybody have any questions you want to ask? And one thing which I should mention as well is that anybody who wanted to ask me any questions about anything and not necessarily here, I'll be in Oh So Good for a very short, for about 20 minutes after we break up and stuff. If anybody wanted to ask me any direct questions or they wanted to, I'll be in there probably about, what time is it? Probably starting around 7:45, 8 o'clock, whatever, just in case anyone asks me any questions. Or if you want to meet me there, definitely want to approach me here after the break if you wanted to meet me there, and we can sort of discuss any details you want, or we can always talk about it here, whichever you're more comfortable with. So yeah, so that's basically the roadmap in a nutshell. And anybody have any more questions you want to ask? Yeah.
Is there a legal, do we have a legal responsibility towards the tax man?
Yes, you definitely have a responsibility to Revenue Canada. That's why it's good to create your own publishing entity, because if you have your own business, like if you're not going to go through a sort of a self-publishing house or so forth, you definitely want to make sure that you separate your business finances from your personal income as an individual. So definitely there's our obligation with Revenue Canada to report that income. And you might claim it as a self-employed individual, or you might claim it as a corporation and fill the necessary corporate tax forms for that. So it all depends on what type of business entity you're running as far as a self-publishing organization.
And if you sell in the U.S., you need a special number as well in order to avoid paying tax in the U.S.
Well, the IRS has their own sort of W-E-8-N forms as well that you could definitely consider as well and stuff. So you respect the IRS tax man as well, so to speak. Anybody else have any more questions or yeah?
But for print on demand,
yeah.
How does that fit into the whole distribution process? I mean, is it literally that anybody who's interested in your book will order from the print on demand through, say, Lulu, and they order the quantity they want, or do you as an individual have to get those printed and then you distribute it to whoever wants your book?
It all depends on what company you're dealing with and what are your contractual obligations. I mean, those type of companies like Lulu, CreateSpace, I mean, they pride themselves on flexibility. CreateSpace is directly linked to the Amazon.com system, and Amazon.com and Amazon.ca is that the advantage is that they're very convenient as far as avoiding dealing with the distributors and paying expensive fees. So it all depends on what package you have with them, and and then basically they have a whole variety of different packages you can use, and you can decide, okay, this is what the package I want to sell directly, or they'll have their own service that they will sell on your behalf as well. You just have to make sure when you're dealing with those companies, especially U.S. companies, that there's a lot of legal fine print that you kind of go through and say, okay, this is the package I want, and make sure that you're not sacrificing your intellectual property control, because the whole point of being self-publishing, in my view, is artistic control of your product, and you don't want to inadvertently be in a situation that you don't have any control because you sign an exclusive distribution agreement with Baker & Taylor or Ingram in the States, or you sign something that is going to compromise your artistic intellectual property rights for your books. Again, you definitely want to be circumspect about that.
So is Amazon, do they have exclusivity through CreateSpace then?
Amazon.com basically owns CreateSpace. I mean, they're kind of work together. So I mean, definitely CreateSpace has become a very sort of popular tool for authors, but I have not gone through the legal agreement of CreateSpace per se, so I wouldn't want to, give you confidence or lack of confidence in their actual legal agreement. But I would definitely encourage you as a writer to make sure. I mean, they seem to be a relatively decent service, but definitely want to make sure you read it closely to make sure that they're not pulling something a wool over your eyes in terms of the whole intellectual property rights area. Anybody have any more questions? Yeah?
Did you know anything about Wattpad?
WordPad?
No, it's called Wattpad, W-A-T-T, Wattpad.
Oh, is that for ebooks, or what is that for exactly?
I'm not actually sure. It's a website that seems to want people to website is books, and it gives suggestions.
Oh, well, I definitely say that as a writer, you definitely, any source out there you want to take advantage of. I don't have any personal experience with that particular website. Is anybody familiar with that particular website here? WordPad, you said it is? WordPad?
No, W-A-T-T.
Like James Watt.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm not familiar with that, so I wouldn't be able to. I mean, there's so many. There's a lot of different websites out there, and some of them are growing all the time. And definitely, it sounds. As a writer, you definitely want to look into it. And then, are they free or are they charging, or like what? How do you know much about them, or?
No, they just keep sending me emails, and I'm supposed to.
Oh, I see. Okay, they're very persistent. Okay, well, I would surmise that they're probably trying to sell you something. I mean, if they're sending you all those emails, so yeah, you definitely, once they become very persistent like that, you definitely want to make sure that they're not a company which is just out to get your money out there. So, because
It's interesting all these different, now it seems there's all these different kinds of ways of distributing and marketing books that didn't used to exist.
yeah, well, yeah, definitely. I mean, the whole advantage of the internet these days is that it's created a sort of information revolution in terms of access to the information, in terms of the ability of people to be access to self-publishing in ways that they didn't have in the 80s and 90s. But again, the only problem is that as a writer, if you want to maintain that sort of quality control once you use these services, you definitely don't want to have a false sense of security that using these services aren't necessarily going to give yourself the product which you're going to be able to, which is going to be marketable to get get into chapters, or to get into the Globe and Mail in terms of review or so forth. So you definitely it's good to have all these access, but you definitely have to be very conscious of the quality side. If you really want to be have that commercial success that you may be seeking to achieve. Yes.
I've come across Wattpad. I haven't explored it very much, but I believe it's like a platform where you can post your ebooks. So if you self-publish, you can use this. I think they have. I believe so. Yes. And I think it's very accessible to anyone who's published can post their short stories or their writings. I think it was actually Canadian.
Oh.
It's quite big, but I don't know much.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, so thank you very much for that contribution there. See, that's what we're all about,
What was that?
Wattpad he was talking about, he says the ebook platform. How do you spell it again?
Wattpad. W-A-T-T-P-A-D.
W-A-T-T-P-A-D. Wattpad. So again, it's a Canadian company, which is good to have Canadian companies out there, and it seemed to be focused on ebooks. It's this gentleman kindly contributed that sort of insight on. So yeah, it's definitely. This is what we're all about. We're trying to exchange information with each other as writers. And again, I wanted to mention that we have a group of writers in Ottawa, up to about close to 70. Anybody who wants to sign up to the meetup group in order to continue the discussion with other writers potentially in terms of these meetup groups, we basically meet at cafes like Starbucks or Second Cup or in restaurants. You would go to ottawapublishing.com. That would directly link to the meetup if you want to sign up to that. That's ottawapublishing.com. Anybody who wants to get any information about myself, to contact me directly afterwards. I have business cards which you can get down here, so that'd be great. And anybody has any questions from? Sorry, yes.
I Googled you.
Oh, you did.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's become.
Interesting person. You give political aspirations.
Oh, okay, yes, yes, I did. I've run for office, smaller parties, because I have, like Canadian Action Party, National Party in 1993, and sort of politically activists involved in Canadian sovereignty type issues, ran in Ottawa venues as well and stuff. So yeah, so my book writing and my political involvements have been sort of, hand in hand in terms of political awareness. But yeah, then I think that my Google profile is a lot more than it should, because I know that when I look at it, it's a lot bigger than most MPs, which to me kind of confuses me. Like, how could I be a bigger profile than MPs? So that's a little bit interesting for me. But somebody has taken a liking to my, writing as a sort of a biography about me, seems on the internet. So Awesome. Okay, so thank you very much for
Are you on
that.
Wikipedia yet?
Yeah, that's what I'm on Wikipedia. That's
Okay.
definitely, yeah. I'm on Wikipedia. That's what I'm saying. It's like my profile is like this, and you go like, you know, it's like, you know, David Peterson is like, oh, like, what's going on here? Like, I don't understand that, you know. Like, I'm having a bigger profile than a lot of MPs and famous politicians. So, yeah, very interesting anyway. But, yeah, that's a good thing about the internet. Gets access to information and, you know, start searching people, you know. Gonna date somebody, oh, let me see if they're on Wikipedia. Oh, my God, they're a serial killer, you know. Yes, definitely could be a good resource out there and stuff, so. Yeah, so anybody have any more questions and stuff like that about book publishing or any point that you want to make? Yeah?
I have a question concerning the business aspects of writing. When you're ready to, if you have your book and you're going to approach some stores to sell them on consignment, would you suggest you have a business lawyer draft a contract, or do you just, how do you go about that?
How you go about consignment in terms of posting a bookstore? Yeah, well, in terms of consignment, it's definitely a good idea. Let's say you want to go to like the chapters down at Rideau's Center, and they want to have your book in consignment. It's definitely a good idea that you're going to give them 20 books to display. You'll have some paperwork saying, okay, we took 20 books at the retail price of you know, $19.99, and you know, and you have to negotiate, you know, how much percentage that they're going to get, how much percentage you're going to get. Usually, in a consignment, the chapters would take anywhere from, you know, 45 to 50%, depending on what kind of negotiator you are. The most important thing, even before you get to that process, before you even get to that process, the first thing they'll say is, okay, bring in your book. And just like the book I presented to you there, which is one of the last ones we published, is that they're going to like, you're going to give your book to like a manager, and they're going to vet it, and it's going to go through a committee in the store, and they're going to go through with a fine-tooth comb. So before they even get to that stage that, you know, you're going to get paperwork and stuff, you definitely have to have your book in a quality stage. And as that writer, which I pointed out, mentioned that, he said that apparently like only 1% of the books that are self-published meet up to the quality standards. So you definitely have to make sure your book is quality if you want to get it through chapters. If you go through Amazon.com, you don't really have to worry about it, because anybody who goes through Amazon.com, you basically see the book, you just order it, and there's no vetting process through Amazon.ca. But the bricks-and-mortar store, you'll have a vetting process. Yeah.
So you just walk in and give them your book and they vet it?
I would advise calling them first, and yeah, speaking to the managers, I have a book, you know, I'm interested in having a consignment, you know, and they'll probably say, okay, just drop it off at the front desk with my name in it, and we'll come and get it, and we go through a committee process, and you usually hear from them in about a week to 2 weeks.
Can I just mention something there?
Yeah, yeah.
That if you get it onto like chapters.ca, all right, and then you go into chapters and you dangle your book to them, there's a better chance of them taking on their shelves because you're already on chapters.
How do you get onto chapters?
I was sort of, okay, so, but that's, okay.
One thing I mentioned in terms of chapters is that before chapters got taken over by Indigo, they used to be very accessible, and chapters used to pride itself on accessibility to Canadian publishers. Now, in terms of how we got our book at the chapters in Indigo Books, these days, you basically, consignment books generally don't get on the website. I mean, generally speaking, if it gets to the website, it's because they want the book to be orderable across the country, because once it gets to the website means that somebody in Vancouver, Whitehorse, Windsor, that they could get the book and order it. So once it goes through the website, that means it's not consignment really. It can be ordered anywhere in the country. Consignment is when it's only available at a particular store. Now, if you, I'm not saying that, so that's how it works 99% of the time. I'm not saying that it's an impossibility or this is airtight, but usually that's how it works. Consignment is only for that particular store, so that you can drop your store books and in chapters in Rideau Street. Somebody in Pinecrest is not going to know about it because it's on consignment. It's not in the system, and the book has to have the shelf space is the primary shelf space, not necessarily going to go to you. So when you have your book at consignment, you basically have to spend some time in telling people, okay, the book's available there, for that to get ordered. Yeah, any more questions? Yeah.
Do you recommend a printing company? That would do a lot of illustrated books.
Printing company, wouldn't be able to recommend you. I mean, I wouldn't want to, I mean, there's all kinds of different printing companies out there, so I wouldn't have any one there particular to recommend you, but there's a lot of different printers out there. It boils down to cost and price and stuff like that, and you want to make sure that when they print the book, that it's you can get it bound properly. So some companies can print off your stuff, but they can't necessarily get it in a stage where it's going to be the binding. The binding is the important part, the aesthetic of getting the book produced. So there are printing companies that can do this. Some printing companies specialize in just getting your documents for the government, like full of photocopying. Some printing companies are more for newspapers, some are like digital, some are books and specialized. You definitely want to get a company that can do books, and if they said they could do it, you want to see an example of what kind of books they produce, so you can see what kind of paper they use, stuff like that. So I wouldn't be able to give you one particular one, because what we do is that our particular company, we have our own sort of in-house services that prints out the book. But so I wouldn't be familiar with the external ones that to be able to actually give you a particular name of a particular company. Anybody have any more questions they might want to ask?
The book you have in your hand is an example when you talked about taking what you were given with a very basic cover and jazzing it up to that point where it was acceptable sort of by chapters.
Yeah.
The cost of what you had to put into at that point the finished manuscript, and you took it from what he brought to you to get to that point. What was sort of the cost there in that? Somebody on our team was actually working on that, so I'll just give you a rough idea. I mean, if you're going to do a sort of for example, the book cover as well, I mean, the book cover like this is going to be a minimum cost of about $100 for the actual book cover design. I mean, it has to be a certain aesthetic, bleeding and stuff like that. So, I mean, it all depends. I mean, I know some authors, for example, spend up to $1,000 and even more on book cover design. If you're going to be doing a fiction book and you might want to, some authors, what they do is that they get artists to do something very unique. But on the other extreme, if you're going to go to create space, they'll have very cheap, cookie cutter or, certain covers that they can use that, that might suit your purposes as well. So each project is different. So, and again, that particular, the guy who I recommend you look over their particular article, he said that the general cost for everything to produce a book like this, he quotes $7,000. That's his particular numbers right there when you factor in marketing and all sorts of stuff like that. Sometimes it can be a lot less, sometimes it can be more. It all depends on what particular book you have, what it entails, how far advanced it is. In terms of our particular service, in terms of Agora Publishing, everything is an a la carte basis. So, our contribution to a book may be just $50 or $100, maybe completely free. I mean, we try to provide as much services for free as possible. So everything is on a case-by-case basis. It could be hundreds of dollars. I mean, it all depends on what services one. So everything is kind of like unique. This author has a certain unique things that he needed to do. We had to spend a lot of time in terms of copy editing the book in detail, sentence structure, things were a little bit colloquially presented. So, we try to preserve as much as possible the artistic integrity of the book while maintaining the message of the book. We don't want to completely change it around. So this book took a lot of time and work in order to do, but some authors might take, it might be a very easy thing to do. So, I mean, it's hard to kind of generalize, but, definitely we try to work as much as possible within the writer's budgets to keep everything as low as possible. Anybody have any more questions they might want to ask? Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to come down there to the presentation tonight and stuff. And I hope everybody left with, having more information than they had before, and left with feeling a bit empowered in terms of the whole, roadmap of the book self-publishing process. Anybody who has any, needs my business card, you want to talk to me later, I'm accessible through phone. I'm accessible through Skype or whatever is convenient to you, or through the meetup group, which we meet up and discuss things with other writers and authors and stuff. I can spend a few minutes afterwards if anybody wants to approach me with any particular concerns or issues they have with a particular book that they're trying to do. Help you as much as I can with that process, or talk to you afterwards. So I just want to thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time. Thank you.